What if Lewis Hamilton's first podium with Ferrari was not the most important thing that happened in China, but rather proof that he can now beat Leclerc within the team itself? Because yes, Hamilton not only surprised the paddock, he surprised Ferrari and left two pieces of information that could change everything. Lewis Hamilton arrived at the Chinese Grand Prix in a completely different situation from the one he had experienced in Australia, where his debut with Ferrari had left more doubts than certainties, with adaptation problems, lack of confidence in the car, and the feeling that the process was going to be much slower than expected. However, in Shanghai everything began to change from the first moment, because Ferrari not only brought important improvements, but for the first time Hamilton began to really understand how to extract the performance of the SF26 in a full weekend, something that until that point he had not been able to consolidate. This context is key to understanding what happened next, because we are not talking about a Hamilton who simply had a good day, but about a driver who begins to fit all the pieces: adaptation to the car, reading the new regulations, and, above all, confidence in maximum pressure situations. From the first sessions, a clear change was already perceived in his driving style, much more aggressive in the braking points, more precise in energy management, and with a much greater ability to position the car at key moments on the circuit. It was not Hamilton in the learning process. It was Hamilton who was beginning to really compete. Meanwhile, on the other side of the garage, Charles Leclerc was having a much more complex weekend than usual. China has never been a favorable circuit for him, and that was noticeable again from the beginning, with difficulties finding the ideal balance of the car and without the confidence necessary to squeeze the most out of each lap. Unlike Hamilton, who was growing session after session, Leclerc remained in an uncomfortable zone, trying adjustments without achieving that leap in performance that he needed to make a difference. And this generated a very particular scenario within Ferrari. For the first time in the season, the feelings between both drivers were completely opposite. The classification was the first serious warning of what was to come. Hamilton manages to place himself ahead of Leclerc, something that not only has sporting value, but also symbolic value within the team. Because under equal conditions with the same car and the same tools, the British is beginning to impose itself, breaking the hierarchy that many took for granted at the beginning of the year. It wasn't an overwhelming difference, but it was clear enough to set off alarms inside the garage, because it showed that Hamilton was no longer one step behind, he was at the same level or even ahead in certain aspects. But the most important thing was not the position on the grid, but how it was reached. Hamilton showed a consistency that he had not had in Australia, clean execution at critical moments, and a perfect reading of the track conditions, especially on a circuit like Shanghai where grip is constantly evolving. That ability to adapt quickly is precisely one of Hamilton's greatest historical strengths, and in China it began to reappear just when Ferrari needed it most. Thus, when the lights go out on Sunday, we are no longer seeing a driver in the process of adaptation. We are seeing a Hamilton ready to compete within Ferrari, and most importantly, ready to directly confront his own teammate. Everything that was going to happen in the race would not be an isolated surprise, but the logical consequence of a weekend in which, step by step, Hamilton had been building something much bigger. His first great statement as a Ferrari driver. The race in China was the real turning point, because everything that had been hinted at during the weekend ended up exploding on the track, and that is where Hamilton delivers the strongest blow to Ferrari. From the start, the Briton showed a clean execution without errors, always staying in the area where the race is really decided, but the most important thing was not his initial position, but how he managed each phase of the Grand Prix in direct comparison with Leclerc. This is where the first key data that surprises the team begins to be built. For much of the race, both Ferraris found themselves in a very similar situation in strategic terms, which eliminated any external excuse. Same car, same evolution, practically identical conditions, and still Hamilton manages to win the direct duel. It was not a simple one-off overtake. It was a sustained, intense battle where every decision counted: tire management, energy use, positioning on the track. And in that context, Hamilton was superior. He knew when to attack, when to defend, and above all, how to maintain the pace without making mistakes, something essential on a circuit like Shanghai where degradation and energy management can destroy a race in a matter of laps. This moment is key because it not only defines the final result, but completely changes the internal perception within Ferrari. Until that moment, Leclerc was seen as the team's natural reference, the driver around whom the project revolved. But when Hamilton surpasses him on the track on equal terms and in a direct duel, that narrative begins to break. It is no longer a question of adaptation or time, it is a question of immediate performance. And here comes the second piece of information, the most profound and the one that really bothers Leclerc: Hamilton's consistency in China. Because what happens in this race is not an isolated case, but rather the confirmation of a trend. Hamilton had already proven to be strong on this circuit before, and now he repeats his performance in a completely different context, with another car, another regulation, and another team. That means that it does not depend on the technical package, but on your ability to adapt and read the circuit. Meanwhile, Leclerc continues to recognize that Shanghai is one of his weak points, a place where he simply cannot find that extra level no matter how hard he tries. The difference between the two becomes even more evident in career management. In a Formula 1 2026 where the use of hybrid energy and the timing of overtaking are decisive, Hamilton demonstrates a much more advanced understanding of the invisible rhythm of the race. That constant game of attack, release, reload, and attack again that defines modern racing. Leclerc, on the other hand, remains more limited, unable to fully exploit those tools, especially on a circuit that already creates difficulties for him. And so, lap after lap, Hamilton not only secures the podium, he builds something much more important: authority within the team. Because he doesn't win by strategy, he doesn't win by luck, he doesn't win by external circumstances. He wins because he was better on the track. And those types of victories are the ones that really change hierarchies. When the checkered flag falls, the result is clear, but the message is even clearer. Hamilton is no longer learning Ferrari. Hamilton is already competing to lead it. And the most disturbing thing for Leclerc is that this has just begun. The closing of the Chinese Grand Prix not only leaves a result on the table, it leaves a completely different feeling within Ferrari, because what seemed to be a simple step forward for the team ends up becoming a silent but very real change in the internal dynamics. Hamilton not only gets his first podium dressed in red, but he does it at the exact moment where Ferrari needed a clear reference, someone capable of leading on the track when the car begins to respond. And that someone, unexpectedly for many, begins to be him. Because if we analyze the entire weekend as a whole, the conclusion is inevitable. Hamilton was better in key moments. Better in qualifying, better in hand-to-hand combat, better in race management, and above all, better in adapting to a complex context. And that's what really changes everything, because Leclerc doesn't just lose a position. He loses, for the first time, the feeling of control within the team. That security of being the reference point begins to shake. And in Formula 1, when that happens, things evolve very quickly. Furthermore, there is a detail that cannot be ignored and that further elevates the impact of what we saw. Hamilton achieves all this in a phase where he is still getting to know the team, while Leclerc has been the center of the project for years. This completely reverses the expected logic. The normal thing would be to see Hamilton getting closer little by little, but in China he directly competes and surpasses. And that, internally, is a very harsh message. Ferrari now finds itself in a very delicate position, but at the same time very powerful. It has two pilots capable of fighting at the highest level, but with a narrative that begins to change. Because when one of them begins to gain weight within the team, not only due to results, but also due to feelings, confidence, and execution, the balance is broken. And that is exactly what has started to happen here. The conclusion left by the Chinese Grand Prix goes far beyond a simple podium or a good one-time result. Because what we have really seen is the beginning of a profound change within Ferrari, one that was not in the plans at the beginning of the season. Lewis Hamilton has not only shown that he can adapt to the team, but he has accelerated that process to the point of competing with and surpassing Charles Leclerc in a scenario where everything was against. New car, new regulations, and maximum internal pressure. The two data that this weekend leaves are conclusive and explain why this moment can mark a before and after. First, pure performance. Hamilton gets his first podium with Ferrari winning the direct duel on the track, which breaks the team's initial hierarchy. And second, the trend. While the Briton demonstrates consistency and adaptation on a circuit where he has already been strong, Leclerc continues to show his difficulties in Shanghai, generating a difference that is no longer circumstantial, but structural within this context. From here on, Ferrari no longer has a clear and undisputed leader. It has a real internal battle. And in these types of situations, Formula 1 is usually ruthless. The driver who best understands the car, who best executes under pressure, and who evolves the fastest, ends up winning. In China, that driver was Hamilton. And most important of all, this does not seem like an isolated peak, but the beginning of something much bigger. Because if Hamilton has been able to reach this level in such a short time, with room for improvement still ahead, the real problem for his rivals and especially for Leclerc is that we have not yet seen his ceiling. Let me know in the comments what you think about all this.